The first time Clara Hayes walked into the hospital, she didn't come to save anyone. She came to disappear. The air inside St. Augustine Memorial felt cold and metallic, carrying the faint smell of antiseptic and quiet suffering. People moved past her in slow, heavy steps, doctors with tired eyes, nurses with clipped voices, families clutching hope in trembling hands. Clara stood among them with a heart so hollow she wasn't sure it could still be called a heart. The world around her blurred, but one sound cut through, a soft cry from a room nearby, a sound so fragile it felt like life itself was breaking. In that moment, something inside Clara shifted, as if a small flame flickered back to life after being buried under ash for far too long. If you believe in kindness, healing, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps this channel grow and reach more hearts. Clara hadn't always been this lost. A year earlier, she had been full of warmth. She taught literature at a small community college in Portland, Maine, where her students adored her for her gentle enthusiasm. She was the kind of woman who baked muffins for her class during finals week, who left encouraging notes on desks, who believed even the hardest stories could still find beautiful endings. But life had its own story to tell, one she never saw coming. Her husband Daniel, her anchor and her joy, was gone within months after an unexpected diagnosis. She spent nights reading his old letters, tracing his handwriting over and over, hoping ink could somehow become a heartbeat. But grief is a silent companion that follows even into dreams, and no matter how many times she read Daniel's words, the silence in her home grew heavier. Eventually, she couldn't bear the quiet anymore. She drove aimlessly for hours, one day drifting into a parking lot she didn't recognize. When she looked up, the sign glowed under the street lamps, St. Augustine Memorial Hospital. She didn't know why she walked in. She only knew she couldn't go back home. Inside, she wandered until she reached a small waiting area where an elderly woman sat alone, clutching a folded piece of paper. Her hands trembled as she tried to open it, but her fingers couldn't manage the delicate creases. Clara hesitated, then stepped forward, offering help. The woman looked up, with eyes swollen from tears, whispering her name, Margaret. She said the letter was from her grandson, stationed overseas, and she had been saving it to read when she felt strong enough. But today, she felt anything but strong. Clara unfolded the letter carefully and began to read. Her voice, though soft, carried through the room with unexpected warmth. Margaret's grandson wrote about sandstorms and exhaustion, but also about hope that she would keep going, hope that he would see her again, hope that life still held gentle things. When Clara finished, she looked up to see Margaret's tears no longer falling out of despair, but out of something else, something lighter. Gratitude, sweet relief. Thank you, the old woman whispered. It felt like he was right here because of you. Clara didn't know what to say. She simply nodded and walked away, her chest tightening. She hadn't felt needed in a long time, but that tiny moment planted a seed. The next day, Clara returned, not because she had planned to, but because something inside her pulled her back. She brought a small notebook and sat in the same waiting area, observing people who came and went with weary hearts. Eventually, a nurse approached her, a tall man with auburn hair and an expression equal parts stern and kind. His name was Jack Rowan. He asked if she needed help. Clara shook her head but confessed she didn't quite know why she was there. Jack studied her for a moment, then quietly said, "Sometimes people come here because this is where the pain lives, but also where the healing happens." When he walked away, she realized healing wasn't just for the sick. A few moments later, a young mother sat beside her with tear-stained cheeks and a crumpled letter in hand. Her daughter, only 9, was undergoing surgery. She whispered that she couldn't bring herself to read the letter her sister had written for comfort. She asked almost shyly if Clara could read it instead. Clara hesitated only a second before agreeing. She read slowly, letting every word wrap the mother in warmth and hope. When she finished, the woman hugged her, spilling her pain into Clara's embrace. Something inside Clara cracked open, the kind of crack that lets light in. Over the next few weeks, Clara found herself at the hospital every ordinary morning, slipping quietly into rooms or waiting areas, offering her voice to anyone who needed it. Word spread fast. The nurses began calling her the letter lady. Families started seeking her out. People brought her unread notes from husbands, from children, from friends who lived 4 states away. Some brought letters they wrote, but couldn't read aloud themselves. Others brought nothing at all, but sat beside her simply because her presence felt gentle, steady, comforting. She read everything with the same tenderness she used when she read Daniel's letters at home. There was a teenage boy recovering from a car accident who handed her a letter he wrote to his dad, apologizing for being stubborn. There was a middle-aged man with terminal cancer who asked her to read a letter he had written for his daughter, to be opened after he was gone. Clara read it twice, once to him, once alone in the hallway where she collapsed into tears. There was a woman with postpartum depression who needed someone to read her a letter from her husband reminding her she was not failing, she was just fragile. There were dozens more, each one leaving a small imprint on Clara's heart. And slowly, gently, she began to heal. She started sleeping better. She started cooking again. She even began writing in her old journal, filling pages with reflections of the people she met and the power of their words. Letters, once a source of sorrow, had become her lifeline. Jack, the nurse who first noticed her, became a quiet friend. He checked on her, made sure she ate, sometimes walked her to her car after long days. He told her that her voice changed the mood of entire wings, that patients asked for her, that families trusted her. But most importantly, he told her he hoped she wouldn't disappear again. One evening, after reading a letter to a man recovering from heart surgery, Clara sat in the chapel room of the hospital, a small, dim space with wooden benches and a single stained glass window. She closed her eyes and whispered something she hadn't said in a year. Thank you. She wasn't sure if she said it to Daniel, to the universe, or to the people who had unknowingly saved her as much as she had helped them. But she meant it. Days blended into weeks, and Clara became a fixture at St. Augustine. People began recognizing her in hallways. A doctor once introduced her to a new resident by saying, "This is Clara. She reads letters to souls who forgot they mattered." Even the hospital director thanked her for bringing rare peace into rooms where fear often lingered. But one winter morning changed everything. A young soldier arrived after a severe accident, his condition unstable, his face pale, his breathing shallow. A nurse handed Clara a small envelope found in his duffel bag. "He wrote this," she said softly. "We don't know if he'll wake up. His mother is flying in. Maybe you could read it to her." Clara nodded, though her throat tightened. When the soldier's mother arrived, she was shaking so badly she couldn't speak. Clara guided her to a quiet corner and unfolded the letter carefully. The handwriting was rough, hurried, but full of love. He wrote about regret, about missing her cooking, about wanting to take her fishing when he returned. He ended with, "If anything ever happens, know you were the best part of my life." As Clara read, the woman broke down in heavy sobs, but her grief slowly softened into gratitude. She hugged Clara tightly, whispering, "Thank you. You gave me the strength to face whatever comes." Hours later, the soldier woke up. The first thing he asked for was his letter, and the first person he wanted to meet was the woman who read it. When Clara entered his room, he smiled weakly and whispered, "My mom said you made her believe I'd come back." Clara felt a warmth that spread all the way to her fingertips. She realized then that she had found a place where loss didn't define her anymore, where her voice wasn't just a voice. It was a bridge between fear and hope. By spring, Clara officially joined the hospital as a volunteer. She started a small project called Letters of Light, encouraging families to write words of love and healing for their loved ones. Soon, the hospital walls were filled with colorful letters pinned to boards, tucked into drawers, taped to walls beside patient beds. She created notebooks for patients who couldn't write, letting them dictate messages that she carefully transcribed. People from the community began donating stationery, cards, and pens. Even students from her old college mailed letters for strangers, inspired by her mission. Clara had found purpose again. She had found a way to honor Daniel by giving to others the same thing his letters once gave her: hope, connection, courage. One evening, after finishing her last letter reading of the day, she stepped outside to find Jack waiting for her near the bench under the maple tree. The sunset bathed everything in gold. He looked at her for a long moment and said quietly, "You've changed lives here, Clara." She smiled a real smile, the kind she hadn't felt in years. "They changed mine first." If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us create more beautiful, healing stories for the world. Before the story ends, please comment below. Kindness lives on. Clara continued her work every day, reading letters, apology, of love, of fear, of forgiveness. She read for people taking their first breath and their last. She read for families mending old wounds and for strangers finding solace in simple words. And somewhere along the way, She realized her own story wasn't ending, it was beginning again. Because sometimes healing doesn't come from forgetting the past, it comes from using your pain to help others find their way back to hope. And that is exactly what Clara Hayes, the woman who read letters to strangers in the hospital, did, one trembling page at a time.